And we're back, and it's COMP123, and it's kind of a day 2 thing. Day 1 we did yesterday, day 2, this is week 2, day 2, lesson 2, part 1, right? And probably I'll put it in as the next part. So if I did like 2 parts with you yesterday, part 1 and part 2, this would be officially part 3 of lesson 2. All right, and like I promised, we're going to do a couple of more polls because that's the kind of guy that I am. So for all those people that aren't here this morning because it's too early for them or it's too cold, oh well. So the first one is, if you guys can join me on this one, and again, these ones are going to be things that I'm going to include, like I said, on your tests, right? So here it is. I'm going to make this live. And let's see if I can make it full screen this time. Oh, I can make it full screen. It's going to be, let me move that thing. There it is. Methods with identical names that have identical parameter lists, but different return types are blank methods. Please join me on polev.com/learn. And you can join me the same way you did yesterday. A is applicable, B is illegal, C is overloaded, D is related, right? And we'll see what you guys are like now. So as you can see, I fixed my resolution issue, right? I checked it out yesterday. And I don't have a problem going full screen anymore. Woohoo! Right? Besides, it makes it look crazy big, right, on the screen. I'll give you guys a few minutes to do this one, right? Think about this one. It's not tricky, but you have to read what it says. So if this was on your test, this question, methods with identical names that have identical parameter lists but different return types are what kind of methods, right? Or blank methods, right? Unfortunately, you can't change your answer after you put in the first answer, right? So I don't allow that. So go ahead. We got 13 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I see 18 people here. So we have a few more people that have not answered. Come on, guys. I know this is early in the morning and I'm kicking your brain awake, but if you answer the questions, it's good for you. Get you back in this mode. Okay, we got 15. We got a few stragglers who haven't answered. You can use your text on your phone. You don't have a phone? Who doesn't have phones? Who?
Sisters.
The sisters don't have phones? All right. That's like the old days, you know, when we want to meet a friend, right? We'd say, hey, meet me on the corner. And if they didn't show up, oh well. You can't text them. You have to go to the phone booth, right? And if they're home, they might answer, right? Because there were no cell phones before. Okay, I'll stop this one, and we'll go on to the next one. So the answer is illegal, B. So everyone who said overloaded, you guys are wrong. And this is not a trick question. The way it works is it's like this. If it's identical names that have identical parameter lists, remember, and we're going to learn about this today, right, in terms of overloading. Each method has its own signature, and the signature is based on what parameters are being sent to it. No parameters, 1 parameter, 2 parameters, the type of parameters, all those kind of things create new signatures, right? The return types don't matter, right? It's the parameter list, what goes into the method that's most important, not the different return types. Okay, so it's illegal. That's the actual answer. So people who said illegal, chew right, baby. I'm going to go back to our polls and make sure that I got all of them. I didn't pull them all in. Yeah, I'll pull this one in too. And we'll do this one now. All right, here's the next question. And I will make this live. So here's the question. It's going to disappear in a second. If you assign, come on, disappear, a default value to any variable in a method's parameter list, then all parameters to the right of that parameter must have blank values. So if you assign a default value, and a default value, if you remember what it is you assign an actual value to it, and all variables, all parameters to the right of that parameter must have blank values. All right, so go ahead. Again, this is sample questions from your tests, right, that you'll be getting. So when you see this stuff, once you've seen these kind of questions, this multiple choice stuff, you'll go, okay, I get it, right? I've seen this before, right? I don't want you guys to be shocked when we do a test, because part of my tests are going to be like this, multiple choice, a small part, and there'll be another part that's practical, right? So a couple parts. So on this part, of the multiple choice part, I want you guys to be able to see it and get 100%, right? And once you've seen it a couple times, and by the way, this is recorded and it is open book, so worst case scenario, you can always look at the videos and go, okay, I gotta write this one down. I gotta write this one down. Right. So we got 12, 13, 14. We got some stragglers coming in the door. I missed the first question. All right. 14. I'll give you another couple minutes, another minute maybe. Maybe. Some people are writing them down too. Smart people. That's good. That's good. That's good. I like it. Smart people, like I said. Well, for those of you, I'm going to stop it now. Well, there we go. We got another respondent. That's 15, 16, 17, right? The answer is default. Default. So if you already start with assigning default values to any variable in a method's parameter list, then all methods to the right of that parameter must have default values. Default values. And here's the next one. I'll make this live for you guys. You name an argument in a method call using its parameter name and a blank before the value. Comma, dot, colon, semicolon. And I'm not sure why, but is it live? There it is. Now it's live. Woohoo. Comma, dot, colon, or semicolon. So you name an argument in a method call, right? So we're talking about named arguments. And for people who don't know what this might be a guess for you, right? But I want you to take your educated guess. So if you don't know what this is, when I say named argument, right, it's okay, because we're going to be covering it today, right? So someone thinks it's a dot. So you name an argument in a method call using its parameter name and a blank. I see other people, this is guesses now. I can see the guesses coming. It's okay, keep going, guys, keep guessing. I'll give you the right answer. But think about this correctly. And this also tells me how many people have actually studied and looked ahead, which means like zero, hardly any of you. I can see right now that none of you read this part. It's okay, or very few people, maybe. So we got what, we got 14, 18, 19 people answering. Ooh, this is I've got the most answers so far, right? This is crazy. Okay, it looks like most of you have answered. I'll give you a few more, another minute or so to give some more possibilities.
Multiple choice in your test, roughly 10 questions,
I'll probably put like 10 questions on, and then, so I'll give you 6 of the 10, like I just did, for each of the chapter sections, right? So if we do a chapter test, it'll be like, a couple chapters maybe, and then it'll cover this one. You have a couple multiple choice. You have, like, let's say, some questions from both, and then let's say a section that you'll be doing a little bit of a practical thing. The whole thing shouldn't take more than an hour, right? Because it's not a big test. Okay, that's enough answers. And we're looking at about 21 answers. And of course, it's the colon that's the correct answer, colon, because it's the same thing as when you declare a variable, right? It's in many other languages, when you declare a variable, you use the variable, the data type, colon, and the variable name. And in this particular case, you're naming the variable, right? It's almost like this. It's kind of a key value pair equivalent. So you're doing like the name of the variable, whatever the variable is called on a parameter, and then the value itself. So before you give a default value, you have to use a colon. And we're gonna see that as we do this more of our stuff today. All right, so thank you for those people who came early. You've got a bit of a preview of what the test looks like. Again, I'm recording it anyway, but it's nice for you guys to test your knowledge right in the morning. Okay, so let's get on this other stuff. I'm going to do this again for you guys who have already joined me on GitHub and have linked up with me. You can go to github.com, and of course my name. My last name, long last name, Tsiriopoulos. I should change it to Vanguard or something crazy because it's just easier, right? But anyways, is Vanguard easier? If you go to the repositories from yesterday, I had COMP123 lesson 2, but I'm going to create another one today. I'm going to call it lesson 2 part 2 or day 2 maybe, I don't know. So let's see what it goes. Let's see how I do. So I'm going to do a new repository. Wait, let's go back. I'll show you that again. So here I am in GitHub, and I want to create a new repository. How do I do that? I go to the plus, and I go new repository. So I want to create a new place where I'm going to hold all my data, right? And then I'm going to name the repository with a legal URL name. Okay, so Tsiriopoulos, and then it'll be COMP123 lesson 02, and then we'll make it really long, part 2. Because this is really part 2. This is like day 2. Okay. So I create my repository, and it gives me this URI, a way of connecting with my GitHub. And now that I've got this, I can create my project, right? So I'm going to go File, New, Project, and I want you guys to see this over and over again. Visual C# in Visual Studio 2013. I'm choosing a console application, right? Where I'm pointing it at. A local directory that makes sense to me, and of course I'm going to name it the same as I'm naming my GitHub stuff. So COMP123 lesson 2 part 2. So no spaces, and press OK. And I'm also going to add it to my. I'm going to create a new Git repository for this. Here I am. I'll wait till this is ready to go. It's still cycling. And when I go to Team Explorer, I'm going to go to Changes. And if you notice on my Team Explorer, it shows me all the included changes. These are all the included changes in my files, right? Because I'm just creating a blank file right now. I'm going to say initiated new project, right? Commit. Commit is a snapshot. It captures a snapshot of my revisions. Every time I do a revision, it captures my snapshot, right? And then it won't. That's local. So there's 2 repositories. There's one local on my system. See, I'm teaching GitHub at the same time I'm doing C#. One local on my system, and there's one on the remote system on the web, right? And what I want to do now is I want to sync them up. I want to synchronize them, right? So the way to do that, of course, here is I'm going to go to unsync commits, right? I have this little space where I need to put in my URI, and of course I'm going to get it from here, right, which is online. And I'm going to go back here and paste, right, and then publish. And once I do that, of course, I'm connected. And when I refresh GitHub, boom, I have my new stuff. That's going to start. We're going to start off here, right? So you can follow me along here on COMP123 lesson 2, part 2. Okay, this is all set up and good. I want to do a couple changes today to our standard project. I want to clean it up a little bit again. So I don't need all this stuff because we're not going to use this right now. So I'm going to kill all this stuff. And just as a refresher, again, we do part book and part Tom, right? So this is the Tom part, right? So question, I want to change, here I am with my, this lesson is correct, COMP123, lesson 2, part 2. And this is the namespace, right? Namespace. So if I was to add in another file, have you guys ever added any other files in addition to your regular file? Well, this is a kind of a preview of next lesson. So this is like, let's say lesson 3, which would be object-oriented programming, which we're going to cover next week, right? if you look at this next lesson, the way we add additional classes correctly is I'm going to go into File. I can do File, and I go New, New File. I could do that and go there. Or I could go to Project, Add New Item. I could do that. Or I could do right-click on my actual project itself, right? Right-click here, and I can go Add, and then New Item. They're all the same, pretty much. So if I go New Item, once I've added it in, I can choose what type of item I'm going to use, right? So in this particular case, I'm going to add in a class, right? And I can call this whatever I want. Let's just use class 1. And I can also delete this class later on, which I'll do right now. But just as a preview of what we're going to do next week. So class 1, I'm going to click Add. I'm not going to change the name of the class. And what does it do? It adds it into my list. So here's program. This is my program. This is class 1. And if you notice, it has all this extra stuff that I don't need. So I can do the same thing. I can get rid of it all, right? And if you notice the namespace, this is why the namespace is so important. My namespace is the same. COMP123 Lesson 2 Part 2, right? Which means, and this is the trick, any class that's in the same, that shares the same namespace as another class can be accessed from any other class. Make sense? So if I was outside of my namespace, and think about a namespace as a package in Java, if you took Java, or as a folder, right, which is kind of the better way to think about it. If it's in the same folder, and a file's in the same folder, and I want to access it, I can just call upon it. If it's in another folder, I have to use a different accessor method. Example, the dot accessor would be used to access that other file, right? So I would say COMP123 Lesson 2 Part 2 dot, and whatever my class name would be, right? In this case, I don't have to do it because we're in the same folder, we're in the same namespace. So if I want to access class 1, all I have to do is call it, okay? Just like if it's another method. So just a preview of what we're going to do next week. I'm going to kill this now. So when you study classes, and I'd like you to study ahead for your object-oriented piece next week, because I think it's probably the most important piece you're going to learn out of COMP123. We are going to focus on object-oriented programming as of next week on, right? This week was kind of, hey, let's refresh your skills. Let's talk about stuff that's a little bit useless, but we can talk about, right? And then next week, you'll get your object-oriented programming. I'll give you your first assignment, which we'll be doing in a couple weeks. And it'll be based on you creating a class, right? So read ahead, please. I'm going to kill this now. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to click Delete. And it's not going to mess anything up. Okay, I don't need this piece. So I'm going to take out my string args. That's the first thing I'm going to take out. Static void main, I'm going to have in there. I'm going to keep my program, I'm going to call it program. But if I wanted to change the name of my program to something else, right, instead of program, it's something else, I could simply right-click onto it and go refactor, rename, and it would rename my program so it wouldn't conflict. If I did it manually, it would have I would potentially would have a conflict. Here, I can rename with this refactoring method, and it would refactor all things or rename all other areas that refer to this class. Same thing with a method. If I like we did yesterday, I'm teaching you refactoring because you know what? We're going to do it a lot, right? And I want you to think about changing the name of your classes. You're starting to work on something. You're doing a test, and you're like, oh darn, I was supposed to name it like this. Don't fret. Don't worry. It's not the end of the world. Refactor it, and you're ready to go, right? If you do it by hand, though, you'll be messed. You'll mess it up, right? So don't do it by hand. Don't just go in there, double-click, and change the name, all right? That's bad. All right. Let's go back to what we were doing yesterday with our PowerPoints. And remember, where we left off, we were just going to get into a different piece. And again, I've put the PowerPoint online for you if you care to look at it, only because I can go full screen now. I'm happy. We're going to go into this overloading methods piece, right? So we did using parameter arrays, and then we're going to go into overloading methods, and then, I can't believe it, I get full screen. So again, when we overload methods, what does it mean to overload? We talked about it actually just now when we did a little quiz, right? We said we have a different signature, right? And that's what it really means. If you when I say signature, and that's why I'm using that word, because it's most often used in most programming languages, it means the type of arguments that I'm sending, or parameters, that I'm sending to the method, right? So example, it says you write multiple methods with the same name. Let's say the method name is Tom, right? Well, calling myself, right? And then, but Tom can receive one thing, maybe he has strength, like the Hulk, right? On one method. But then I want to also change his, the name of his dog, right? And the second method, right? As an example. So I can have two methods. They have different uses. And you see that all the time. When you program, you might see when you pull down IntelliSense, it shows a couple methods, right? This is how we do it. We create something called overloaded methods. And there's some keywords we have to use in order for us to do this. So here's an example of this overloaded method stuff, right? I'll get it out of your way so you can see. So we have the main method, right, which we come into this in this particular demo. And we see display with borders, which is the method that we're calling. But you see that we're sending a string, here's a string, and here's a string, right? There's just different strings that we're sending to this display with borders, right? And in this particular case, this isn't an overloaded method. This is just a regular method that we're sending stuff to. It has one parameter, which is a string parameter, and it's accepting a variable called the word, which is local to this scope between these two curly braces. I should test you on what scope means. Eh? Scope is between these two curly braces. Scope is between these two curly braces. Scope is between these two curly braces, right? There's different scopes we're talking about. And scope means where the variable lives. It does good things, and then it dies. Maybe it does bad things and dies, right? Just like, we live and die, right? The cycle of, the variable life cycle. Life cycle gets created within its scope and dies within its scope, right? So the same thing goes here. So here, if I'm creating a constant, right? I'm declaring two constants, extra stars, which is we're assigning 4 to, an integer constant, sorry, and then another constant string symbol. So a string constant symbol with an asterisk as its value, right? So two constants. These constants and these integer variables, right, live and die within this scope. Okay, just to remind you. So you can't see them in here in your main method. They're only available here in your display with borders method, right? We have a for loop. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Why is this bad? Oh, I'm killing myself here. Give me a steak and kill me and take away my vampire teeth, right? Come on, guys. What is this? Why is this bad? It's just one line. This is really bad. This is like super, super duper bad, this piece here, right? And the reason why this is really bad, this console.write thing, is because I don't have any curly braces. I don't care who says it's okay. It's wrong. When I see this, I cringe as a programmer, right? Because this means that right for now, we're expecting console.write to be the only thing that this for loop is going to do, right? And by the way, why would I use a for loop here instead of a while loop instead of a for each loop or something else? Why? Why am I choosing a for loop as a looping structure? How come? Well, I want to do it more than one time, but why for to loop? Why not something else? Why am I using a for loop here? Usually we use for loops because we know how many times we want to iterate. Iterate means loop. I want to loop a bunch of times, so I know how many times. I want to have a fixed number of times. I want to iterate, right? That's less than the size of the length of the word. When you're using the length method, this length method of the word variable, which is coming in through our parameter list here, right? Remember, strings have different methods. They're complex variables. They're not simple variables, right? They're complex data types. So when a string also has methods like length, and what length does, it measures how many characters are in the string. That's what it does, right? So here, this size variable says, give me the length of the string that's coming in, which is the word, plus add some extra stars, which is like 4, right? And that's the size, because we're going to add 4 stars to the length of the word, right? That's what it's basically saying here. So if my length of the word, if my word here is Ed, this is the first one that's incoming, right? And what would the string length be? 2, correct. But what would be my size variable? Well, that would be 6, right? Because 2 plus 4 is 6, right? So 6 is in here, right? And this would be what we're testing for inside our for loop. We have a fixed, we know the length, how many times we want to iterate, right? Okay, and what is this doing? It says display with border, right? So it says we're going to output to the same line the symbol, right? And what's the symbol? Right? A bunch of stars, right? A bunch of stars, and we're going to do it for the size of this word. So we're going to match up the number of stars with the word, and we're going to put these stars in here. So that's the first for loop we're going to do. And then we're going to console.writeLine, which is going to provide us a new line. It's going to go to the next line. Again, I want you to read when I see this, because I might have on your test. Tell me the output. What's the output of this without using your computer, right? Tell me the output. And it might be on a multiple choice. Like, what's the output? Here's the little code, and tell me what the output would be. A, B, C, D. You have no time to. You could put it on your computer if you want, but there's no time for that, right? And because you're going to have a bunch of those. I want you to be able to read code and know what the output's going to be, right? Because that's a really good skill. You should be able to debug your code just by looking at it, right? And the way to do that, of course, is to go line by line, because that's what procedural programming is, right? Going line by line and executing the code in your head. Like going, okay, this is what it's going to do. This is what it's going to do. And some people keep almost like a little trace map. They kind of get an Excel sheet, and they sit there and go, okay, this variable on this iteration is going to be this value, okay? And keep doing it over and over again. And that's how we do debugging the old way. The new way, you go and put a debug statement, and you can put a breakpoint and all this kind of stuff. You guys learn how to do debugging? No? Darn, man, we're going to do that this semester for sure. I got to make you guys experts before you go to programming 3. Okay. Anyway, so that's the first thing. So it goes to a new line, and then after the new line, it gives a symbol, right, which is one of these stars, plus the word, and some spaces. Here's a space and another space, and then the other star. So that's why it gives you, it adds in 4 for extra stars, right? Because extra stars, what they're doing is they're calculating 1, 2, 3, 4 extra spaces along with the word. That's what's happening. Make sense? So here we are, right? So the symbol, which is a star, plus a space, plus the word, plus another space, plus the symbol, again. So you have 4 extra characters along with the word, and that's why you add 4 to the length of the word to loop. To make all the symbols the same length. That's what you're doing here. Oh gosh, not another one. This is 2 in one method. I'm killing myself, man. Look, here's another for loop with only one line. Yeah, okay, it saves space. And maybe the guys who've written this book, or Joyce Farrell, who wrote this book, maybe she just from a space saving perspective, she put it in here so that we it could fit on one page. Okay, I understand that. But there should be some curly braces here for best practices. Okay, and if you're doing a code review in the future, maybe you're not going to be a programmer in the future. Maybe you'll be a manager or someone who does code reviews or a unit tester or something. And you see this, someone's done this, you go back and tell them it's wrong. You say, no, I don't accept this. It's bad practice. Okay. We're also going to do a couple of more new lines with our write line. We're using these escape symbols, escape characters. That gives you new lines. That's what they do. The \n, a couple more new lines. Right? Okay. And that's really what it's going to do. So it's going to surround our word with these symbols. That's what it's going to be doing. It's going to box our word up with the symbols. Okay. So that's what this one is, and that's what it does. Exactly what I said it would do. This is the output. Right? Okay, let's do an overloaded one now. So here's the first one. That was the first method. And here's the exact same method, except this time it's taking an integer. So here's the integer right here, right? Number. Why would they call me? Why? Why do they call when I know I'm here? Yeah, so this one is another method signature, right? So the previous method, if you go back, right? The previous method here had a string as the parameter, and here, right? It's a number as the parameter, right? So, okay, now why is this one useful? Let me see. So extra stars equals to 4. The symbol is a star. Extra stars equals to +1 this time, right? Instead of whatever extra stars is +1. And then we have another integer which is leftovers equal to the number. Okay, and now we have a while loop. Why would I use a while looping structure as opposed to a for looping structure? Sorry? I could, but usually what I want to use a while loop for is I want to test to see, like you said, if this condition is true. And if it is true, then I'll loop. If it's not true, I won't loop. What about a do while loop? What happens there? I kind of tested this already with you guys one time, right? It's a post test. So a post test and a pre-test. A post test means that it'll at least loop once. A do while loop always works at least one time. A while loop may or may not work. For loop always works for a set number of times. For each loop, the way it loops, it basically takes the number of elements inside of an array, typically, or a collection of some kind, and loops through that collection, because array is a type of collection. All right, so that's what this thing does. So it loops through. It's going to say how many leftover. If leftover is greater than or equal to 10, and we calculate leftover by saying it's equal to number, that's incoming, right? And for x is equal to 0, x is less than the size, which we calculate as extra stars plus 1, extra stars being 4. There's a lot of kind of duplication here, right? Extra stars is 4, the size is 5, 4 plus 1, right? And then, of course, we say we're going to loop and say this for loop is going to do, and again, I'm screaming when I see this, right? It's bad. We see that this for loop is going to go at least 5 times. It's going to repeat, and it's going to make symbols on the same line, 5 symbols at the same time, right? Based on the size of the variable. Okay, we're also going to increase our size here based on the number, right? Because if you look back here on this while loop, we're going to calculate the size. What's the difference between plus plus size and size plus plus? Shh, someone else. Come on, guys. I want to hear some guy from back in there in this part of the room. Plus plus size or size plus plus. There's a difference. Why? Okay, good. Yes.
Plus plus size does it before, and size plus plus does it.
Why would I want to calculate something before? If I use this here, this for loop is a good example. Plus plus x. Yes.
If you wanted to stop.
I could. Yeah. Although I recommend that most for loops are going to be x plus plus. Right. You're going to see that structure more often. Because what is this doing? It's saying x is equal to 0, right, in this particular for loop. X is until, this is the condition we're testing. So we started off at 0, and we're testing to see that x is less than the size, which is here. We've just defined size as extra stars, which is 4 plus 1, 5. And then we're looking at the leftover, where leftover is equal to the number, right? And we're saying leftover is equal to leftover divided by 10, which I could have written how? Leftover divided equals to 10. Right? I could have done that shorthand, right? And then I'm increasing my size, plus plus size, which is, I could have used size plus plus in this particular case, based on how many times I loop, until my leftover is greater than or equal to 10. So this could mean that I'm looping this 10 times, which means my size, depending on the number that I put in there, is going to increase proportionately, the size number. And this is kind of a confusing little piece of code here, right? You'd have to trace it a bunch of times. So now what I'm saying is, if my size, I'm just going to give it my size 10, okay, 10 stars, let's just say, right? And if my size is 10, and I start at 0, I iterate, 9 times, right? But what's going to happen is, I'm going to increase my variable, but before the check. So basically, I'm going to say, even though I start at 0, I'm going to go 1 higher. So I'm going to start at 1, right? Which is kind of weird. So it's going to console.write a bunch of symbols, right? And then what's going to happen is it's going to go to the next line, and then it's going to write the symbol, which is a star, plus a space, plus the number that I give it, right? Plus another space, plus the symbol. And the number is a numeric value. And of course, the output looks like this. Hold on. This. 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 7. And so it measures the length of the number. That's what it does. That's what it's doing. All right, so it can fit, because we can't check the length of the number, the length of the string, because we don't have a number dot count or a number dot length. We don't know there's no method for numbers, an integer, that gives us the length of the integer, like the actual digit length. We don't know. We have to test for it, and that's what this method is doing. Let's go back. It's quite complicated, but you see here that there's both methods inside the same class. The first method and the second method, both methods, right, are written with the same name, display with border. They both have the same return value, which is void. They're not returning anything, right? except it gives the programmer a chance or an option to do either one or the other. So you can use either this method or this method. And if you notice here, and up here if you can see it, there's different parameters that are being sent. One is a string, another one is an integer. There's a longer integer, a really long integer, and then a really long string, right? So either a string or an integer is being sent to this method it's called the same name, but it does different things. Why would I create methods with the same name with different piece parts inside? Why would I do that? Why don't I just make two different methods? One that says display with borders string, display with borders integer. Why not just rename the methods and have two different methods? It's exactly the same as what I'm doing here, really, if you think about it, in this particular example anyway. Because sometimes what ends up happening, and I'll give you the answer, is because sometimes what ends up happening when you're programming is you only want to provide one input, right? Again, we're talking about encapsulation here. We're talking about data hiding, right? We're talking about when we do object-oriented programming, we only want to expose one method to the outside world, right? And we also want to make it user-friendly. I don't want to make 5 methods that do different things that just have the different ending, integer, string, decimal, whatever. It makes no sense because really it's the same stuff, especially if there's a lot of the same piece parts in here, right? Which is what it should look like. There's a lot of duplication here if you notice. Const int extra stars 4. Why am I putting this constant inside each method twice? That's increasing my code base. I don't need to do that. And the same thing with my symbol. These should be in here, right? These should be something that we're able to pass on, or maybe we should call another method that declares them constants. And each of these methods should call upon other methods. Because what we're doing is we're just replicating these piece parts over and over again. Why would I do that? That makes no sense. Let's do an example, right? Because I think talking about it and seeing it is one thing. We'll talk about overload resolution in a second. So here I am with my main as an example, and I want to kind of create some kind of random number generator. You guys done random number generators yet? And thing? Yes? No? Last semester, did you guys do random numbers at all? You did? Woohoo! How did you know how to do it? So I want to create a random number that generates a result between 1 and 6, right? As an example, how would I write that? Anybody? Come on, take a risk, guys. If you're wrong, it's a good learning experience. I'm going to ask you. What is it? Or that's you're thinking about another language, right? But the way, okay, that's not anyone else. How about you? You know how to do a random number? Pseudo-random number. If I'm going to declare a pseudo-random number, how do I do it? Okay, let's start like this. How about we do this? Here's my main method, and if I do it here, my main method, I'm going to say random, right? That's the first thing I'm going to use. And what this does is it gives us this a random number generator. It's a pseudo-random number generator that uses a random number seed based on our timestamp, I think is what it does. Anyway, so that's the random, and we have to declare a variable. Let's just call it RND for random, right? And we're going to make it so that it's equal to a new random seed, right? So why would I declare it like this? This is something that's new, right? We've never seen this before, maybe, and maybe this is the way it's been written. You're probably shaking your head, which means you've never seen it like this, right? So why am I saying what's random? This is a data type, right? Or a class. That's what I'm saying. And I'm declaring this variable here, right, as I'm referencing it to a class. I'm creating a reference between this variable and the class name, right, which is random, right? Now, random is part of C#. I don't have to import a new namespace or do anything different. This is just part of our class. It's built in, right? So if I go new random, when I use the new keyword, what I'm doing is I'm instantiating a new object. Hint, hint, next week we're going to be talking about objects and classes. And we need the new keyword to instantiate, when I say instantiate, which means give life to, right, a new object. The blueprint, when we talked about object-oriented programming, classes are blueprints for objects, right? So random has its own blueprint, It has its own, it's almost like a program, a little mini program within our program, right? That we're calling upon. It's already been written by the developers who made C#, right? So we're calling upon this thing and we're saying, hey, I want to instantiate a new object based on our random class, right? Now, if you notice, when I wrote this, let me go back. If I open up the first parentheses, I see that I have two signatures, because we're talking about overloading today, right? Two signatures. One of them is this one, where there's no parameter that's being sent to the class, right? If I click on the next one, it says I can also send it a new random number seed, and I can send whatever number I want there, an integer, that basically seeds, give me another way of making it more random, if you will, because it's gonna poll. What random does is it polls the time, right? And if I want to give a new random number seed, I'm going to give it another number, right? So it starts at a different location. That's all it's doing. So don't worry about that. But there's two different signatures. One that takes an integer, and there's one that takes nothing. So I want you to think about that when we do our next piece, which is creating this overloading method kind of idea. Yes?
You can adjust where it starts, is what that is.
That's pretty much where it is. But for now, let's leave it the way it is. So I say I'm going to use a semicolon right there. So here's my random number. And inside my random number, I'm going to, from here, I'm going to use the method, because there's a method that comes with random, the class. If I type RND and use dot, my dot accessor does two things. Remember, what's the base class for all of my classes? Usually it's something called object. Now it exists both in Java, and there's another one that exists here in C#. But basically, it has all these methods that are exposed, right? So there's one that says equals. I could choose that one. That's a method of the random class, right? There's get hash code, get type, next is what I want to use. Next bytes, next double, and toString, right? I want to use the next method, and what it does is it says it generates the next value, and next method there's two overloads for this as well. So this method that I'm using off of the random class, here I am, I'm going to type next, which I want to use. I open my braces and it says, hey, there's three different overloaded methods, right? For this particular method, three signatures. So the first one has nothing. I can accept that one. The second one takes a maximum value, right? And it says returns a non-negative random number less than the specified maximum. So if I put 100 in there, it'll go from 0 to 99. Make sense? And the next one does a minimum value and a maximum value. It says returns a random number within a specified range. This is the one I normally want to use, this signature, right? Because I want to roll the dice, right? I want to roll a die from 1 to 6. I want to use this one. Okay, so here it is. And if I know that that's the case, I can put something like this, 1 to 6, right? And that's my range that I'm using. Okay, so this is going to generate a number from 1 to 6. I need to do this with you because everything we're going to do from now on is going to be about games, making random numbers. It's going to generate random results and all this kind of stuff. And I want you to know how to do this thing. So this is our first thing we're going to learn. Okay, here's our random. And now I want to output this random number to the console. So we're going to do a console dot writeLine. And we're going to, of course, put in our random result, right? We can do that. But of course, we want to assign this, one more thing, sorry. I'd like to assign this random result, right, to a result variable. So I'm going to create a variable for this. And I've already done a random variable. So I'm going to declare a result variable, which is going to be an integer, right? Result, right? And we're going to initialize it to 0. So our initial result is 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to say result then, right, is equal to a random number between 1 and 6. That's what this is going to generate. A random number between 1 and 6. Okay? And of course, then we're going to output our result, right, to the console. And I also want to create that whole, I'm going to give a space here, console.writeLine press any key to exit. Watch what I'm going to do here. And I'm also going to go console dot read key, just like we normally do, just so we listen for any kind of input, right? Make sense? Okay, I'm going to run this thing now, and if everything goes well, right, I'm going to run it, and if everything goes well, I'm going to get this number 4, just for the sake of what we're doing. I'm going to go into, if you're using Microsoft Windows 8 or Windows 7, you should be able to go into Properties, and I'm going to change my font, so actually my layout of my console window, so that it's white background. And I want to go with my font so that it's my color, sorry, so that my screen text is black, right? And I'm going to go with my layout now that it's my font size. I may make it maybe a little larger, right? So I'm going to go with a different font. I'll go with Consolus, right? And maybe I'll make it like 18 to make it really big. Press OK.